Welcome, welcome. Thank you all for joining us from wherever you are in Canada. It's always a pleasure to have members from all across the country join us. I won't say hi to everybody because the list has just gotten too long, but consider yourself welcomed. You're always welcome here at Wheel and Anchor as part of our community, even if it's just online in the moment. Um, Let me say a few words quickly about who we are and what we are for those of you who have not joined us before. For the rest of you that have heard me say this spiel 100 times, you can grab a quick coffee. Wheel and Anchor is a community of travelers from all across Canada. So we are a Canadian-based company that is focused on putting together amazing travel experiences all around the world. And a couple of the things that make us a little bit different from the ordinary is the fact that we do consider ourselves a community. We relate to all of you as our members, and we want you to feel a part of something because, as you'll see in the next slide, one of our missions, one of our goals is to um, bring people together and have them be more connected to one another. I mean, it happens on almost all of our trips that people come away having met a new friend, a new travel buddy, and it's maybe somebody that you see on a regular basis or you just see when you travel a couple of times a year. But fostering those connections is really what makes the satisfaction of traveling the world so much greater because you've got somebody to share those thoughts and those experiences with. If you think about past trips that you've done, with friends, and you sit around over a cocktail or a glass of wine, even years later, you think, remember that trip that we did, back to the desert in Arizona, or we, visited cruise in Alaska, or we went across Italy wine tasting in Tuscany, or whatever it happened to be. But it's having those connections that really prolongs the experience and really makes it a part of your identity. And that's um and it's that identity that we like to bring together. You see lots of smiling faces in some of the photos from our different groups in different parts of the world. And we are going to be taking a further step in that direction, like we did before that, the pandemic, which of course, interrupted our plan for a couple of years. This summer, I'm going to be visiting a couple of spots around Canada to host events like we did before the pandemic, and hopefully get a few of you out and meet some of you in person whom I have not met before, as well as all the new folks, and again, really foster this idea of community that has you, become connected to one another. And when we say well-traveled, my interpretation of that, or what that means, is seeing a place a little bit, a layer beneath the obvious, in the sense of taking time, because travel is, the type of travel that we do is organized travel. It's small group travel. Or it's medium-sized group travel in the case of trips where we, charter a yacht or a river boat or something like that. Um, and but we try to structure it so that you have the time to immerse yourself a little bit more and to also do it on your own. You've always got a host there, you've got fellow group members, but the experience of travel, even inside of a group, is accentuated when you take those moments to go off on your own and explore. And if you're on one of my trips, I'm like, go and get lost somewhere. I'll come and find you. But that's when the magic of travel really happens. And that's when you move from being a tourist to a traveler. It's another one of mine. Anyway, I'm not going to say any more about that. We have lots of materials on our website and in our newsletters that sort of speak to how we are a different organization, a different community than most other travel companies in Canada. All of this is not possible without an amazing team of people, and I'm going to introduce one in particular for those of you who don't already know. Paula, who is our lead trip specialist and the one who is manning the phones on the phone 8, 9, 10 hours a day.
Not hopefully not 10 hours a day, but
Hopefully not. But there to answer
trying to
all.
get back to everyone.
Yeah, exactly. We're trying to get back to a reasonable time frame with the ebbs and flows of people's interest in various trips. And as I say, but we've got a whole team that's really dedicated to making our experiences very, very unique and special. And Paula's the one that's going to be the liaison, if you will, between you and our team, and getting your questions answered and getting you signed up. Oh, and I'm Gordon, by the way. If I didn't introduce myself before, I'm the founder of Wheel and Anchor. I'm the crazy guy that put all these this whole notion of Wheel and Anchor together and curates every single one of our trips. And that's all I do. I'm on the road. It seems like 10 months a year, going from place to place, checking out hotels and meeting guides and eating at restaurants. And it sounds like a glorious job, but I tell you, it's not easy. I've been going for 3 months straight. Time to sit down for 5 minutes, but I have to leave the country again tomorrow. So, the country that I'm in now, that is. Anyway, today's agenda is all about Morocco, and we're going to take you on a little trip around it. And this has become I want to say maybe in the meantime, our most popular, our best selling trip. We sold out all of the trips this year, and next year already, even this trip, Paula, you were saying to me that we've tentatively got already half the trip full for this trip, and we haven't even officially released it yet until now. So,
Yeah.
but given the feedback, I know that everybody that's been on the last couple of trips was talking to each other, and they're all like, "Oh my God, this is such an amazing trip. You need to go." And Morocco is just an in destination, which is why we're going to talk all about it now. And starting with the map, as I always do. I'm a map lover. And so, but I have to put my glasses on because it's really small on my screen. Even though, of course, I know where Morocco is, and I'm sure you do too, up in the northwestern corner of Africa. Um, and so we're going to begin in Casablanca, which is um, really the biggest commercial center of the country. We begin and end there. We don't spend much time there. I'll explain that why. And we go overland for the whole trip. And beginning in Chefchaouen, which is an amazing city up in the Rif Mountains and Northern Range, this smaller range of mountains in Morocco. We head down through to Fez, which is probably a town you've heard of before if you've done any research into Morocco. We then go across the lower Atlas Mountains into the Sahara Desert, into the western part of the Sahara, to the Merzouga, and spend a couple of nights there, which is, I mean, there's so many highlights on this trip, but staying in the desert at our desert camp is really certainly high on the list of things people remember from this trip. We then head into the Atlas Mountains, into the middle and upper mountains, visiting some incredible scenery before we cross over into Marrakech, which is yeah, it's one of my most coolest, interesting cities that I've ever had the pleasure of visiting, and we spent the last few nights there before returning to Casablanca before going home. What makes this trip particularly interesting, I was just speaking with Amber, who hosted our last trip on this, as well as Mara, who hosted our trips last fall. And she said to me that people really described this as a number of our members described it as a pinch me trip, because people were constantly like, I can't believe I'm actually here and I'm witnessing what I did about these incredible landscapes, because it we see so much of the countryside and so much of the culture and the cuisine, and that, which we kind of try and do on all of our trips, but it's in Morocco, it just has that amazing combination that everything is relatively accessible. And I say that, and again, going back to the map, there are some long drives on this trip, and we mention this time and time again, because you to see Morocco. I mean, sure, you could perhaps, well, actually, you can't really fly too many of these legs. You have no choice but to go overland, quite honestly. But you're crossing through this, the steppe landscapes that are leading out to the Atlantic Ocean. You're going over two sets of mountains: the Rif Mountains, the Atlas Mountains, the Sahara Desert. And everywhere has such a special feel to it. So, but you have to cover a lot of ground, and everybody that's come back has said it's absolutely worth it. So anyway, let me jump into our day-by-day itinerary. And again, we begin in Casablanca, which is a very modern city, quite honestly. It's got a combination, obviously, between old and new. We don't spend much time here, and there's good reason for that. You're going to fly in. Obviously, it's a bit of a long trip. Casablanca is the best gateway. There are flights directly from Canada, from Montreal specifically, into Casablanca. Um, And with the jet lag and all, you're not going to want to get up too much, but rather just sort of resting up to enjoy the trip. Not to mention that the city doesn't offer a lot for tourists. It's safe enough to wander around. I mean, Amber commented to me that she did a little bit of reconnaissance and wandered around Casablanca, but there wasn't really anything, with the exception of the mosque, which I'll talk about on our last day, which is absolutely a highlight and something that we include in the program. But other than that, you'll you get the feeling of being in Africa, and it's the shock of it. I just came from Senegal, which is a country 2,000 kilometers to the south, and you all of a sudden realize, wow, this is a different part of the world, and Casablanca is definitely an introduction to that. So we have a nice hotel that we use. It's comfortable enough, and again, it's a good place for us to start on our journey, which begins by heading up to the north towards the peninsula that separates Africa and Europe, of course. And on our way up to Chefchaouen, we'll stop in Larache, which is an amazing town that it features one of the longest human settlements in this part of Africa, quite honestly. And Africa has some pretty old settlements, as you know. It dates back to the Phoenician era. It's a very historic town. We'll stop and have lunch there before we move into Chefchaouen itself, which will immediately strike you because of all these blue painted buildings that just give it a very sort of a soft, welcoming kind of a flavor to it. There's a lot of Andalusian influence in here. In fact, all across northern Morocco, because of course, the proximity to southern Spain, to Andalusia, you see these cross-border influences from one side to the other, just as the same as if you visit Grenada or you visit Malaga in Spain, you see all of the Arabic influences that you'll find up there. The thing that most stood out, I think, for our group about Chefchaouen was the fact that they have some incredible markets. The women come out of the hills, out of the Rif Mountains, and have some incredible crafts, handicrafts, artists, artistic things, which again was commented to me. My Amber was, we see markets everywhere that we travel, but here it just felt so much more authentic stuff that was, made by these people. They bring it down out of the mountains and put it on offer here. And I mean, again, this is a great shot that gives you a sense of these blue painted buildings throughout the town. There's a kasbah in the main part of the square, which is a kasbah is a fortress, a historical fortress. We'll hear that word throughout the presentation, and you see that throughout the tour, the different styles of kasbahs that are featured all around Morocco. And it's a lovely town. We'll have lots of time here also to explore and wander around on your own. And this is part of the beauty of Morocco as well, is that it is very visitor friendly. You can walk around everywhere. I mean, perhaps not in the middle of the night with a pocket full of cash, but it is very, very safe. Again, we had some amazing feedback from our members who just thought that it was wonderful. And it takes sometimes the first couple of days to get because you're in Africa, you're in Morocco, and you hear all those often stories about this kind of a place, but it really is comfortable and well suited to sort of doing some exploring on your own. As we head then down to the south, again out of the Rif Mountains into the area around Fez, we'll stop at one of the first of many, many UNESCO World Heritage Sites that we're going to see all throughout Morocco. Here in particular in Volubilis is the Roman archaeological ruins that we find here that again give you this insight into the history in particularly the northern part adjacent to the Mediterranean of all of these different peoples that passed through over centuries and centuries and centuries. So it's a wonderful town, a wonderful stop on the way to Fez. Fez is where we'll end up later on in the afternoon. And we're going to check into the first of a number of riads that are on this trip. Actually, I think we changed on this program this year. We've got, even in Chefchaouen, we've got a riad available as well. And what's special about the riads is we went out of our way to find this kind of accommodation because this is something that is very, very specific and unique to Morocco. Riads are traditional Moroccan houses, palaces that are its most notable feature is this courtyard that you see here in the picture. It's sometimes a garden or it's a seating area. These are ancient palaces that are beautifully designed. They were lived in by obviously the nobility from past generations, and many of them have been converted into small hotels. But the nice thing about them is that some of them are still actually family owned, and in fact, you'll meet the family of these riads. And so, there might be a part of it that is dedicated for their own personal use, but it is really like a hotel. So it has a very different feeling. And because they're also small in size, sometimes they're only 8 or 10 rooms. In some cases, on this year's trip, we even had to go into two riads that were like two houses or palaces that were nearby one another, simply because there's not enough. So you have the feeling like you're part of the family, like you're part of that nobility that lived in this again generations and generations ago, and that is such an important part of the experience of being in Morocco. Another aspect of them, the fact is that the riads are usually very, very well located in the Medinas or adjacent to the Medinas, the markets in the old town, which gives you access on foot to all of the best things, the souks that you find in Morocco. As I mentioned before, the design is around a courtyard. In some cases, they'll have a swimming pool in the middle of the courtyard, but more often it's usually a sitting area or some gardens. And the reason for this design is it's sort of naturally, it's a naturally cool area in an environment that can get quite hot. I mean, at this time of the year, when we go in April, it's a perfect time. It's springtime. The weather can get warm, but it doesn't usually have those searing hot days that you have in the summertime. And of course, the fact that they're filled with local antiques and pieces of art and really pieces of Moroccan history, which just again gives you a real sense of being in Morocco, which is why again we go out of our way to find and reserve these as far in advance as we possibly can, so that we get some of the best riads that we can find in Morocco. So as I say, we've got a few nights, 3 nights in total in Fez. And we'll get a chance to explore the Medina here, which is the old town. It's a whole labyrinth of small, narrow streets where you get to see all of the classic Moroccan architecture, the stucco work that they're so famous for in this part of the country. We'll have lunch with a local family, which if you didn't already meet one when you checked into to the Riad, you'll here get a chance to sample the Fassi cuisine, which is specific to this particular region of Morocco. And in fact, the whole city of Fez is considered to be one of the gastronomic capitals of the country, and why it's one of the must-see destinations in Morocco. Because we've got 3 nights, we've got a whole day dedicated to just doing stuff on your own. There's a number of different things you could do. Here's a great shot of the tannery, where they still use traditional methods to dye leather and to make it into all these handmade goods. And I'm not much of a souvenir collector, but when you visit a city like Fez, you just feel compelled because the stuff is really, really like the person that's making it is right there in front of you. And it's not like it's unique to other places in the world, but it really is something very special in Morocco. You could also go and visit the Jewish quarter, and they have a synagogue in there, which is the influence of Judaism here, also a very important factor, and important to put into context when you think about relations between the Islamic world and the Judaism and the Jewish world, given everything that's going on in this day and age, is something that's very, very interesting. There's also a caravanserai, which is an older form of accommodation, if you will, where the traders would come, and typically there's a compound where the horses would be underneath and the people would sleep up above. And so this is a fantastic spot that houses a great museum right now. So one of the many things you can do while you spend a day enjoying Fez. We then make the longest journey of our trip. We head down to the south again, crossing the lower so-called Atlas Mountains, This is something that folks appreciated with the way we designed this itinerary because the Atlas Mountains is quite a large range. They've even got ski hills in the high Atlas Mountains, but we see the different levels of them: the low, the middle, and the upper, the high Atlas Mountains, which make for quite a remarkable experience. So I say this is going to be a long drive, but very, very scenic along the way. We'll actually pass some of those ski resorts that I mentioned, and we'll arrive into Merzouga, which is on at the western end of course, the Sahara Desert, the largest in the world, as we all know. As soon as we arrive that evening, the sun will be going down. You'll get a chance to do a sunset camel ride. One of those things to check off the list. And not everybody has to do it. We've definitely had some rougher camel rides, but it's something you'll probably want to give yourself a chance to enjoy. And this desert camp is really truly amazing. Again, the comments that I read from our past members is that it doesn't look like much from the outside, but very spacious interiors, lots and lots of room, much bigger than you'll get in your average hotel rooms or even in the riads we're staying in. Fine dining, wonderful service. Of course, some of the local entertainment in the evenings. And honestly, the thing about staying in the desert, perhaps most of all, is just the silence. Being out there among a starlit sky, there's no sort of light pollution and no noise, and the serenity of it is absolutely breathtaking. So you get a sense of what they look like inside. Once you're there, it's the type of thing where you could probably spend many more nights just relaxing and enjoying the desert, but 2 nights is enough to give you a good sense of what it's all about. And on our full day, in between our 2 nights there, we'll go out and explore a bit of the Sahara. And if you haven't traveled in the desert before, this is a great introduction to it. The big red dunes of the Erchebi that will again you can go and visit by camel. You do a 4-wheel drive ride, which is obviously a little bit more exciting and exhilarating, more like a roller coaster, and you can get out to points in the desert where you literally see nothing but sand. Indescribable. And as I mentioned, at night, of course, the incredible stargazing that you get from the fact that there's just no light pollution. You're literally out in the middle of the Sahara. Once we leave the Merzouga desert area, we head back to the west. So we're going to head in the direction of, or southwest in the direction of Marrakech, heading into the high Atlas Mountains. And so here we're going to get up well over 2,000 meters in elevation, still not high enough to be an issue with altitude, but nevertheless will give us some amazing vistas over this great landscapes, among which the Todra Gorges, where you have 400-meter high walls that make for an incredible spectacle. And all throughout this part of the Atlas Mountains is the Kasbahs again, and I talked about them a little bit earlier in Chefchaouen, which are the fortresses. Here, they're often made of adobe, so these clay bricks that make them very distinctive in their character. So we'll get a chance to visit some of those. We'll stay a night in Bulmanidades, which is one of the more well-known towns with the Ait Benhadou, which is one of the best preserved original Kasbahs, where they've actually done a lot of films. So you probably see. I don't have any names of any of the films here, but if you've ever seen a film featuring, sort of Arabic scenes, then there's a good chance that one of those was done here at Ait Benhadou. This is where we'll head over a pass as we make our way into Marrakech. And we'll arrive again later in the evening after an exhilarating ride through the Atlas Mountains, coming down into Marrakech, where we spend the biggest chunk of our trip in this city that is so special. And once you get there, you'll know why. The colors, the smells, the amazing architecture of the different mosques and the gardens. There's so much happening in Marrakech. So we'll get a chance to visit the souk there, which is, for me, my favorite part of visiting Marrakech. It's vast, it's huge, and because you've got ample time there, you'll probably return to it over at least a couple of times, because you can never really sort of get enough. I can't say, or I can say that they will probably offer you to sell you a carpet or some other trinket more than once when you're there. It's no different than if you're visiting the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul. But it's all part of the fun and the experience. And, it takes a little bit of getting used to. But it's here in Marrakesh as well that we'll get a chance to go out and learn about the cuisine. And I had a note here as well talking about cuisine. Um, One of the comments we got from our members as well was they appreciated the diversity of the cuisine, that it wasn't just tagine and couscous every day. Tagine, by the way, if you haven't had a Moroccan tagine before, um, is often chicken or lamb that is sort of slow cooked in this triangular shaped ceramic pot. You'll see zillions of them when you're in Morocco, and they'll try to encourage you to bring one home. They're a little bit unwieldy for the luggage. And personally, I love chicken tagine and lemon is one of my favorite dishes anywhere. But we don't serve that every day. You get a great cross section of the flavors and the spices and so on. And this was, those of you who've traveled on my trips before know how much food is important to me. Not just to me, but it's important that we try to delve a little bit into the local cuisine and have really, really amazing dining experiences along the way. And we've certainly accomplished that here, and you'll get to experience that. And at the same time, also learn a little bit how all these, some of these dishes, like a tagine, were made. And that's probably the point where you'll say, geez, I should take one of these things home. I don't recommend it. They're a little bit heavy. But nevertheless, when you've had a true Moroccan tagine, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. As I mentioned, talking about tagines here, you get a million of them in all kinds of different colors. uh, on this day, actually, there's an opportunity to do an optional hot air balloon ride over Marrakesh. I highly, highly recommend it. At sunrise, of course, and you see this amazing Medina, this amazing old town with the backdrop of the Atlas Mountains. It's really quite spectacular. There's many things that you can do on a free day there. That's why this is certainly one of the best places to do it. There's a number of galleries here. As you know, Morocco has a lot of French influence. So there's a Musée de la Femme, a museum that's devoted to women in Moroccan society. This is another thing that I like about Morocco is the fact that compared to other Islamic countries, women are able to be much more liberal, and society is much more liberal here than it is in other places of the Arab world. So if you've ever thought about doing some exploration into it, Morocco is a great place to start for that very reason. And it's not to say that it's not interesting to visit other countries in the Middle East. I think it is very interesting, but you have to realize the differences. So this is kind of like the soft entry into that. There's also the opportunity to visit the Sidi Ganem, which is this incredible hub of design and craftsmanship. So if you're looking for really good stuff, and at this point you probably already have a suitcase full of stuff at this point in the trip, but nevertheless, there's an opportunity to sort of find some more, and we'll have a lovely farewell dinner with sunset views in the distance as we slowly say goodbye to our trip. We'll transfer back to Casablanca with one final highlight that I mentioned at the beginning, which is the Mosque of Hassan II, which is one of the largest in the world. I also believe, regardless of your, religious following, I think that delving into and visiting sites, places of worship like this are well worth it, if not to get an understanding of what Islam means. And we'll hear a lot about it along the way, because again, I encourage that we understand what it actually means to people every day. But here you get to see also the grandeur of it. Obviously, this is the equivalent of churches in Christian religion. So it's a pretty amazing sight and quite an ending to our trip. We'll have lunch in Casablanca and one final night, and then you'll fly out the following day to make your way back to Canada, or perhaps onward to another destination in Europe or somewhere else. We've positioned this trip, and Paula, you'll quickly check. We have this trip set up so that you can join onto one of our other trips. I believe Jordan may be adjacent to it, in case you're interested in doing more of the Middle East and the Arabic world on this trip. So this particular trip is going to be offered next year in 2025 twice, once in the spring, once in November. The November trip is not actually officially out yet in terms of the full program itinerary. And so I think we're not sort of formally accepting bookings, but because, as Paula, you were saying, we already have half of the April trip filled. And if November is a better time for you, you can certainly let us know. We'll put your name down for it. It is just in the process of being finalized. And so details, of course, including all the detailed inclusions and so on, as usual in our program itinerary. But just to give you an idea of what we're talking about for this program, this is for the whole land portion of the program, beginning and ending in Casablanca with all the accommodation and breakfasts. It's a 14-night program. I think it's remarkably good value. In fact, some people said we should charge more for it, but we're not doing that. Obviously, this is, I think, a reasonable a price for what is undoubtedly, again, a very, very memorable trip. And I won't go through all the details here. Airfare is in addition. And again, the nice thing about Morocco is the fact that you can fly from Montreal to Casablanca. In fact, I think that's what most of our members did, Paul, if I'm not mistaken, is they use that Montreal-Casablanca flight. And then you can connect in on Air Canada from it was Air Canada that was flying that route, was it?
There was a few different combinations with this connection through Europe for, yeah, just depending what most
Just depending
wanted
on
to
where you're coming
do.
from in Canada, what appeals to you the most. I mean, again, that's how we organize our trips. You can fly in whatever you want. In any event, you will be met at the airport and brought to the starting hotel. And I know some people like to fly in a day or two early just to sort of get caught up on the jet lag. So airfare is in addition, and trip cancellation insurance, as with most of our trips. If you sign up right away, so for those people who've already signed up, or anybody else that does so before the 15th of June, we're actually offering that hot air balloon ride. We're throwing that one in. So that's a nice bonus if you sign up early. And yeah, obviously the earlier we get the trip done and dusted, then those of you who don't get signed up in time, you're just gonna have to join us in November. But that is available to you as well. So I think it's time to take some questions about the trip. Of course, you may have questions specific to your own agenda, your own needs or intentions. You can always email Paula or give her a call, and she'll get your questions answered. But in the meantime, we'll take any questions that might have come in about this trip. From
I
yes.
did have a couple of members asking whether we were offering an extension, which we're not, but you mentioned it lining up, you thought, with Jordan.
I think so.
Was that no? So
No, not Jordan.
not next year. No, I
Right.
don't see there's a gap in between dates for any programs for those that are interested, but you have the
Okay.
flexibility to arrange your own pre and post or stopovers en route, depending on where your flights connect.
Exactly. Exactly.
So for
Um,
members that are interested in that.
yep. I see a
Diana
couple.
here is, oh yeah, asking what are the travel distances, travel time between locations?
They range from Casablanca up to Chefchaouen is not too bad. It's about total travel time is about 3-4 hours. Again, it's split up with a lunch. The longest journey is when we go from Fez down into the Merzouga Desert. It's about a 7-hour trip. We don't do it all in one leg. We always make stops for nature breaks and stop for lunch and along the way. But there are definitely more, like there's about 3 days that are more than 5 hours of travel, just because they're large distances, and as I say, there's no other way to cover them. But between our team that puts the trip together and our local partners that provide the transportation, we try to make it as comfortable as possible by stopping along the way. And our host has always got something up their sleeve to make the journey as comfortable as possible.
Okay, that brings me to a couple other questions that I've been answering from members is what are the vehicles like? And do we have what was it? Yeah, what are the vehicles like? And I just had a question that I saw come in from someone. Sorry, I noted it down. Do we have a no middle seat policy? So which might get answered with the vehicle question.
That is a good question. Well, let's put it this way. The vehicles that we typically use for this trip are sort of 15 to 7 passengers minibuses. So, but we will, I believe that's the case. You know what? I got to double check that on my notes. I would like to come back on that one
On that.
because, yeah, because um, in any event, we don't ever fill up vehicles. So so if we have, for example, 16 people on this trip, you're going to be in likely a 24 passenger again mini bus or coach, because we always leave extra seats available, whether there's always a middle seat available. Well, again, well, we don't generally use vehicles where there is a middle seat. There's usually two and two, so there's two on each side or two and one. Um, but for anybody that's of particular interest to, I will double check with our operations team exactly which vehicles are being used for which leg, so we can answer that question because I just don't have it at my fingertips.
All good. Yeah, it varies by destination based
Yeah.
on what is really available there. Kevin is asking if we know, this is always a popular question. Do we know who the host and guide are?
Yeah, we don't.
Um,
It's we in the past we tried to assign the hosts a year in advance, but between our the schedule of our hosts and just the logistics of it, we just don't know that far in advance. So we are typically assigning hosts on our trips around usually around 6 months before the trip goes. That's the what we're aiming for. If we know it earlier, we'll certainly advise, or we'll be able to answer the question, but we just don't know at this point. Um, we have pretty much all great hosts, so no matter who you go
yeah,
with,
I
to
generally, after everyone comes back, they're like, wherever that person's hosting next, count me in. So it's like, and I've heard that about many people, Todd, Amber, Rose, Beth. I'm trying to think yourself. You name
exactly.
it. Everyone's always wanting to go where Gordon goes. And many more. So you're in good hands
You're in good,
nonetheless.
indeed.
Helen's asking here if they were to arrive a day earlier, is airport pickup and transfers included? Do you want to touch on our new
I
transfer
will touch on that.
policy?
Yeah. So from the starting the end of this year and onward, we are only including transfers on the day the trip starts. Because quite honestly, it has been a logistical nightmare dealing with transfers on different days. Because then if something goes wrong, and who do you get in touch with? And so we've had to make the decision to make transfers on days. We're happy to share with you who our transfer partner is. But we've just gotten into too many issues trying to organize different transfers on different days. So we'll only organize them for the day of. The transfer is not it's not a break the bank kind of thing. It's I think it's like $25 or something like that. But we can't anymore organize them on days other than the arrival day, just because otherwise we have to take responsibility and our host can't be there, and it's just complicated.
Yeah, no, customizing it for everyone, which we've been doing in the past, going forward. If you arrive early, yeah, as Gordon said, we'll share with you to make your own arrangements with the transfer company, and arrange for that, and you forego the included transfers on arrival or departure if you extend either end.
Yeah.
But we can book your pre and post hotel if you wish. Have another question here. The 2024 trip included touring Tangier, 2025 does not. Can you
Yeah,
share why that changed?
because of all of the towns in Morocco or of any of the towns that people didn't like, it was Tangier. It's a bit of a rough and tumble place, and in recent years has gotten more so because it's kind of the hub of migrants crossing from Africa into Europe, because of course that's the closest point at which Africa and Europe are together. And so yeah, it wasn't worth it. So we took it out. That's the bottom line.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that. Helen was asking if there's any interesting wildlife to see.
Uh, Beside the
Morocco.
Moroccan Helen, I can't think. No, there.
Did you say that?
I'm just kidding. The yeah, that was a terrible joke. There are definitely wild animals in the mountains, up in the Atlas Mountains. Not so much in the desert. You don't really see much wildlife in the desert. It's pretty desert-like. Um, but I wouldn't call this a wildlife tour, to be perfectly honest. If you're lucky, you'll see some mountain goats and sheeps and bighorn sheep and so on and so forth up in the up in the high Atlas Mountains. But I wouldn't say that's the reason to go on this trip, because you might not.
Yeah. Perfect. We'll have many other wildlife focused trips, Costa Rica, Namibia, Botswana coming up
Exactly.
that we can share with you. So yeah, Morocco strongly being culture. Was there one thing that you'd want to maybe share with our members in terms of, I know you touched on like it being Africa and you dropped the name of India, in terms of the cultural experience and difference in ambiance that is like good for members to know?
Yeah. Well, I think that, when you visit a place like Morocco, and particularly you get into the smaller towns, or well, even in the bigger cities, is that, the average standard of living for the average population, the material wealth, if you will, is at a much lower level than what we're used to in North America or in Europe. Or in the sort of more major cities in Asia. I mean, people just look poorer, but poor is a matter of perspective, because they don't share the material wealth, again, on average, that we do. But they're richer in other ways. I mean, Morocco is, like most countries in Africa, a third world, a developing country, but at the same time, it's probably one of the most advanced, next to Egypt and South Africa. But it's an eye opener. It's an eye opener, but this is kind of honestly one of the reasons to go and see what life is like for the vast majority of the population of, not just in Africa, but of the planet. And Morocco is a great place to do it, because you live, and particularly in the context of this trip, it's very, very comfortable. It's luxurious, compared to, again, what the standard is like for most people that live in Morocco.
Awesome. And I think also a key thing to is like the buzz that'll happen in the markets and such as well. Like there's I don't know what the right word is. I don't want to say vibe, but like the busyness and the chaos of it that goes around in them. But it's also got like a high energy to it.
Indeed,
So
that's for sure. A
something
very
that you might not be used to depending on here in North America, the way,
Let's try to get the rest of the questions.
Yes. Marge
The
is asking here about the hot air balloon ride. Are there any other optional excursions or additional costs?
There's no other. So we're not. I'm not really a big fan of optionals. Of like a lot of bigger tour companies will have an optional list and an optional that. On this type of a trip, no, we don't have. I don't believe there are any other optionals. That being said, we include free days and encourage you to go and do stuff on your own, and so that might involve getting in a cab, or obviously buying lunch here or there. So those kinds of things are optional and extra cost, but we are not selling optional tours. I don't think there's any on this trip other than the hot air balloon.
Right. Lynn is asking if you have insight in terms of the easiest way to cross from Morocco to South Spain if they tack on a post trip.
Yeah. So the easiest way, quite honestly and very bluntly, fly. I would fly from Casablanca to Malaga or to Seville, or that's what I would do. Obviously, it's close, and you could take the ferry from Tangier, but I'm not sure that you're going to find that to be the most pleasant experience. So you could take the train. You could go overland from Casablanca back up to Tangier, and then take the ferry across, to say that you took the ferry across from Africa to Europe. I'm not sure I would recommend that. It's possible, and it's, I'm sure, safe enough, but it's just the experience. Honestly, I would fly.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Another question here, I think it was from Linda, sorry. What is the internet access and connectivity like?
It's good in Casablanca, in Fez, in the major cities. There, forget about it in the desert. It's just, I think they do have like a satellite connection, but for that whole part of the trip, those few days in the Merzouga Desert and crossing the Atlas Mountains until you're back in Marrakech, I would count on being offline. There is signal, and the mobile network is pretty decent, which to me is pretty decent, means is about what you get in Canada. Um, if you leave the big city. But yeah, for those parts of those trips and those longer stretches, again, there is a mobile signal, but I wouldn't want to rely on it entirely. But in the cities and the hotels, with the exception of the desert, absolutely no problem.
Fabulous. And another question that's come in here from Kevin is after noticing some swimming pools in the pictures, what would the weather be like? Will it be warm enough to enjoy the swimming
Absolutely.
pools?
Absolutely. Absolutely will be warm enough to join the swimming pools. That being said, there's no swimming pool in the Sahara Desert, obviously, and in some places in Bulmanadaresa, high up in the mountains and so on, it's cooler, and I don't believe up there that they have swimming pools. So, yeah, a lot of the riads don't have them. So we did show one with a swimming pool, and again, if that's something that's important to you, then again, just drop us an email and we'll confirm exactly where there is a swimming pool. Um, but we're not staying in traditional hotels, the Hiltons and the Sheratons, that they all have sort of swimming pools, because honestly, in a lot of these places, there aren't those facilities. But weather-wise, it's warm. It can be cool in the evening. But generally during the day, you're going to be in the 20s for sure.
Yeah. Another note with that as well is in our additional information document, we will provide the links directly to the hotel and Riyadh websites. So you can see them. And when you book, if you want to request that you're staying at a property with a pool, if that's available in a said location, then make sure you make a note of that and I will note it. And we will make sure that's passed on so that it gets considered where it's applicable and possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, cool. I think
Fabulous.
we got most of the questions, and but I'm sure there'll be more. It's usually happens about 2 minutes after the webinar is over, you'll come up with another question. That's what Paul is there for. We want to make sure that you get every question that you have answered, that you know all about the trip. We have lots of extra information now, particularly now that we've had feedback. And listen, that's the beauty of our trips as well, is the fact that we read every line of every piece of feedback that we get. We make tweaks, we make changes, we make improvements. I mean, everybody on this trip was rated 9 point whatever out of 10 from based on everybody's feedback from the last trips. But even then, my goal is not. I'll never be satisfied until everybody says it was 11 out of 10. So, um, yeah, that's the way we work. So please do drop us a note, and if you're interested, get in on that hot air balloon ride over Marrakech and sign up and join us. And yeah, hope to see you on another webinar, perhaps meet you at an event this summer. And otherwise, take care, and we'll see you on one of our upcoming webinars in the near future. Have yourselves a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.